Okay, hello everyone. Christopher, and Micah Lawrence here again for another conversation. And I'm kind of excited to talk about this because it's been coming up in my own personal world in the past couple of weeks, especially. But you and I have been talking about, we're going through kind of some massive shifts on the planet right now. We're kind of all getting an upgrade in consciousness is a good way of putting it, right? And as we are kind of raising our own vibration and our own level of consciousness, what's happening for most of us is the denser things that are inside of us that maybe we weren't even aware were still there. The denser energies are coming up to the surface. And a lot of us are having even physical symptoms from this. Like for me, I had a really bad respiratory cold a few weeks ago, and then even been having like some chest pains and spontaneous crying and like things like that happening. And the tendency, of course, as human beings for us is to then get all upset about the symptoms that we're having and what's wrong with me, and do I need to go to the doctor? How do I fix what's wrong, am I ill? Like what, all of the things, right? That's what the mind does. But a lot of times there's really not anything that needs to be done, but to allow these things, these denser things to come up and out of us.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is something homeopaths have known for years, which is that when you are starting to develop symptoms, whatever they are, your body's already healing something that's held inside it. And it's always been the case. It's just a little bit more extreme for a lot of people as we're having more and more tumultuous sort of world events as well. You mentioned the fires in California, where it's on a collective level, everyone's getting affected by the smoke and so everyone's getting that sort of sore eyes. So what that is for the body is it's showing the anger and the sadness that we've all been held on to, about what we're seeing in the world, and our body is the unconscious part of us, and it's like what I call the shadow of the mind. So it's everything that the mind isn't consciously aware of. So when we're living through the mind will only know what it wants to know given its programmed state. And so the body's holding all the bits of you that you're not conscious of, and therefore it's always useful to know whatever symptoms come up in your body, that's the part of you that you didn't know or factor into your life, so your sadness, your pain, your grief. And so when you describe your spontaneous crying, it's the grief coming out, or if it's inflammatory, then it's the anger coming out, So we have to allow that for ourselves and for other people to see your dog is
sorry, hold on. Sorry about that.
That's right. We have to allow that to happen in ourselves and in others, because as homeopaths, what we say is that if you live more in fear or judgment about that illness, then we block that healing process. So just to recap what you said before, which was we are going into a higher level of consciousness, and what that means in real terms is we're imagining and envisaging a better version of us, right? A better possibility of what we can do in our lives and who we can be in our lives. So it's an identity. And because we have got access to more information, we can imagine living a freer, better, more connected, more loving, more peaceful life. And so when we start to connect with that and start to recognize I could be that, then your body's releasing all the lower density energies that you've been holding on to, which is creating a contraction in your body. And that is keeping that more contracted, limited a negative version of you, you know, in place, because that's how we know who we are. It's what we're sensing, what we are. So by releasing it at the time, of course, it's unpleasant, but afterwards you feel a new sense of freedom, a new sense of upbeat aliveness, you know, and spaciousness within you, you know. So that's the reason why we get any symptom. Something like 25 years ago when I studied homeopathy, the one book that I read from cover to cover was The Healing Power of Symptoms by Michael Detlefson. I don't know if you've read that before.
I haven't read that one.
It was like that covered the whole thing about holistic healing, you know, and they were very, you know, sort of on the money as far as I was concerned. So we have to, so on practical terms, when we're getting these physical symptoms, we have to notice the fear that comes up, you know, because there are two problems that when we go into fear, there can be two problems. One is that we fear the illness, and we think the illness is going to kill us, you know, and that's what's happened with the coronavirus, you know, where and the corona, as we said earlier, is crown, and it means sovereign. So it's actually a virus that's upgrading us to become more sovereign within our being. That's my take on it. So either we're fearing death, and yes, there will be a death, and it's called death of the ego, right? So it's the character you are. Or we start defining ourselves according to our symptoms. So if you start crying a lot, we start to think, oh, I'm a person with depression, I'm a person with bipolar, I'm a person with fill in the blank. And then you, again, your mind is doing a sneaky trick, which is to create another identity that you are with your illness, you know, and then we start to kind of get busy with that, get busy and investigating what that illness looks like and how you have to be as that person, you know. And even when people, say for example, people with serious mental health issues, surprisingly enough, they can get better, and they do get better once they started to look beyond and know themselves beyond their label, you know. Because when you take medication for it, it might suppress the symptoms, which again is suppressing your healing. It also suppresses your life force, and therefore your life force can't then expand you into a better place beyond that limited character you are. So that's the whole setup as far as I'm concerned with illness and disease. And so we have to learn to start reflecting on symptoms. So reflecting meaning, what is actually going on with me? Well, let's look about tears. Tears is water coming out of your body, so it's cleansing your body, you know, and it's just flowing, you know. You know, mucus, coughs, it's all, again, the body's releasing something, you know, it's toxins, you know. If you look at the coronavirus symptoms, it's cough, it's diarrhea, it's lack of smell. So those, the body is it's releasing, and it's also disassociating with its current reality. So the lack of smell, the smell is the most primal way that we associate with the physical world. It's earth element. And when we stop disassociating ourselves with our physical reality as it is, we can start to imagine a better version of us, you know, because we're not allowing our physical reality to define who we are anymore. You know, I'm a mother, I'm a, you know, a wife, I'm a this, I'm a that. Actually, there's something beyond that. There's a being beyond that, you know. So again, the body's doing something quite intelligent, except the mind won't recognize that, because the mind is the shadow of the body, you know, so it won't recognize it, you know. And ultimately, the whole ascension process is to transcend out of the identity of that is made up of the mind and the body. So the mind and body are a coin, and there are two sides to it, and there is something beyond that mind body organism, which is the eternal being that's behind it, the witness, and that's what we're starting to connect with. You know, so
like when I've been going through my own ascension process and the things that are coming up it's to put my focus on what is before all of that, right? It's like, it's a little bit like, I would use the word tricky, I guess, because we've all been taught, right? Like, we don't want to bypass our emotions and all that. So it's not a bypass.
No.
It's feeling whatever's there. It's recognizing that this is a mind body purge that's going on, or it's coming up, that needs to be felt because you probably pushed it down into the recesses when it happened because you didn't have the capacity to feel it or whatever. But there's also a lot of, I hear a lot of people talking about like just going fully into that and like all of that. And that's not 100% the truth either, because it's, you don't want to identify, right? It's like, don't identify or like go, okay, now I need to go through this, like, what, 6-week thing where I'm feeling this and I need to, and like people just like make everything into a thing.
Yeah.
For me, it's been to allow all of that to come up, but to be in that observer seat, to go beyond all of that and be in that space of focusing on what am I before all of this, and be in that space as you witness it all coming up and you feel and you allow.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a point of reference from which you're actually allowing it to, if that makes sense.
Exactly, because there's two aspects of us, and I keep saying this, there's two aspects. There's the observer, which is the spirit, which is the one that is aware, but there's also the singularity point, which is our soul. And the soul is the one that feels. Okay, so when you are okay with the symptoms and you're feeling the symptoms, what you start to get is an intimacy with you. So it's like you loving you. That's the act of loving you. It's not looking in the mirror and saying I love you, because that's done with the mind, right? True love to yourself is being intimate with your feelings and being there with your feelings. So it's allowing your feelings to come up and being fully intimate that, because that's what we look when we're looking for love, isn't it? We're looking for that intimacy with somebody else, but actually we have to start with ourselves. So it's about being there in our darkest place with ourselves, climbing into that hole with ourselves and saying, this is what it feels like. Because what we're doing is when the body is releasing those feelings that were dumped in there in the first place, every time we're doing something inauthentic, we're actually hurting ourselves. And so we're dumping those feelings. All that our inner child, which is represented by the physical body, is being hurt when we're trying to do life in a particular way that isn't authentic. And so we are starting to climb into that hole and be present with those feelings. And that makes us actually feel quite safe, and it stops us from going into fear. And it's something that we can naturally do, but then the mind keeps talking us out of it by saying, but what if it's something serious, and what if this? And I'm not suggesting that people don't have their symptoms checked out, because sometimes that is the best way forward, because you need a professional to just give you the okay that you're not having something seriously wrong with you, because we're not going to go into denial and say, oh, it's all okay. Right. But at the same time, it's that fine point of, yes, being practical and saying, I need to check that those symptoms are, I'm still okay, I'm still safe. But at the same time, also recognize I don't have to live in fear of these symptoms. That's not mandatory, and this also is the same for your children, because I know when parents' children get ill, again, we have to trust that process, trust that there's a wisdom behind those symptoms. And I know in Britain, there's a lot of medication of children at the moment. There's a lot of Calpol, aspirin, antibiotics, and really a lot of those illnesses are self-limiting, or they're telling you something about that child that needs to be resolved. For example, tonsillitis is about repressing what you're feeling. You're not expressing, you're not communicating what you're feeling. So maybe parents need to just make a note of that, and think maybe there's something we can help our child express themselves more. That's the kind of work I do with children. So check it out, but at the same time recognize if it's not life-threatening, then rather than suppressing those symptoms, actually learning from the symptoms This is where the mind has to become humble and say, maybe we got it wrong. Maybe there's another way we need to handle this situation or handle our children, you know. And that's not blaming parents, because nobody's got anything wrong. It's just being informed that there's something you can do better, you know. So yes, it's living in fear, because fear blocks the heart. Then the life force is blocked, because that's where the life force comes from. And so therefore the life force can't quickly and easily transition you out of that purging stage back into a restored stage, where, you know, health is about harmony and balance and coherence, you know, and that's the definition of health. And that's our natural state, is to be healthy once we've purged everything, you know. So dis-ease starts from within, where there's a conflict of interest between the mind and the body. You know, there's a conflict of interest. So that's what dis-ease is all about. It's not an entity in its own right, you know, it's a personality of its own, you know. And if we talk about the coronavirus, it's a program that's kind of like upgrading from the collective consciousness, you know. So each person will have a different set of symptoms. They'll either be hit very hard or not hit so hard with the symptoms. Some people don't get any symptoms at all, but they could still have it. But, you know, because their body doesn't need to purge so much, they don't need to have the symptoms, you know. But it's a bit like plugging your iPhone into the socket and getting an upgrade at night time. That's how I see viruses working, you know. So again, it's not the conventional view.
Something I was just thinking of while you're talking is another thing that I am seeing a lot of, and certainly has been in my world, but a lot of like autoimmune coming on right now. And I know you have a lot of, that's a big area that you do a lot of work in. How do you, you know, I know that you see this as like the fire energy that's being blocked, but can you speak to that a little bit for anyone who's also experiencing that, which, or any kind of, to me, autoimmune's a lot to do with just inflammation, overactive inflammation in the body, and however it's manifesting looks a little different. But
yeah, because the thing is, for me, the imbalance lies in where the mind has taken over too much, where the mind is over responsible. So we're making ourselves over responsible, and that makes us hyper aware of things that are happening in the world that are actually not really anything to do with us, you know. So we feel that there are dangers in the world, and the mind will kind of make a meal out of that. And the reason why autoimmune happens, and I'm not the only one who says this, is because when we were children, if we had to you know, children naturally are very authentic, you know, they just do what they do, when they do it, how they do it, and they just are very silly most of the time, and they're very connected to their subjective selves. So they learn who they are through their subjective impulses, what they like, what they don't like, and that's through play and through interactions, and just starting to get to know what the world is all about. And when the child, for some reason, due to survival reasons, doesn't feel safe to do that, you know, we all know, if you observe children, when they feel in a very safe environment, they can just be very silly and very free. And then the moment there is something going on that could potentially be dangerous, and the adults around them are not quite with it, you know, they don't trust the adults, you know, then that child has to go into becoming the parent or becoming the responsible one. Now, that is a very difficult maneuver for a child to do, because they don't understand the world at this stage. They haven't got the ability to objectively assess the situation. So in a way, it's creating a neurosis within the child, saying, I need to control this. A bit like dogs, you know, that think they have to be the alpha in the household, you know, they get very neurotic if you don't train your dog properly and it doesn't believe it's the underdog where it doesn't have to do anything. Then they start to get neurotic when the owners leave the house, and they start chewing things up because it thinks it has to be in control of the owner that's left the house or the family that's left the house. And that creates a destructive, it's quite a good analogy actually, because it's a destructive impulse within the dog, because it doesn't understand how to control the environment, but yet it knows it has to be responsible. So it's responsibility without true knowledge or understanding or power behind it. And that's at the root. And so the child loses connection with their natural impulses, their natural life force, right? So if you think about the life force is already animating the child, and the child feels free to do that. And so she starts to get to know herself. So when she's starting to go into a situation where she feels she has to be responsible, it could be in school or at home, that's the setup. And then as adults, we stop connecting with our life force, and therefore our life force, which is the fire energy, because it's the thing that expresses itself out here, starts to go against it because there's a disconnection with your own life force. So the life force sees you as the enemy. So what the life force is doing, your protective mechanism, your immune system that's meant to be there to protect you, actually sees you as the enemy and sees you as the problem. And the same way the mind is seeing the child being the unconscious, the one that doesn't know, as the problem. You don't know enough. You don't know enough. You need to figure this out. You need to like make things happen in the world because things aren't right in the world. So that's the kind of mindset we end up being, over responsible, figuring too much out and starting to identify too much with the thinker and the doer, and not enough with the water and the earth, which is being and feeling. We've disconnected from our own being and our own feeling. And that's what has to be reconnected with. So we start to trust our feeling center. So if anyone who has autoimmune, the first thing you can do is go into a very strong, peaceful being state. So meditation can really help, where you recognize you're still okay when you're just being, and also feeling the inner flow, feeling your own inner flow, when you feel like doing this and when you feel like doing that. And you start to connect more and more to those aspects of yourself that your mind is cut off from. You don't stay in this very neurotic kind of abstract state of trying to figure everything out. How do I do life? How do I do life? How do I make things work in my life? How do I control the situation? You know, that's how we can consciously change that whole setup inside us. And when we do that, water is a very good element to work with. And I know that shamans, I actually know personally that there's shamans in Bali. You don't have to go all the way to Bali to go there. There's a thing called a water ceremony, where they through intention, they douse the client with water, and they get them to discharge all their emotional charges, because there's too many emotional charges held in the body, you know. So again, you can do things like water rituals, again, to cleanse your body, to cleanse, because we're just balancing out the elements, you know, to get you back connected. I mean, I've done like today, in fact earlier on today, I've set up this new fountain in my garden, a solar fountain, and for once the sun's out in Britain. I was thinking, I must look at my fountain, and it's just such a beautiful thing to hear, to listen to the flowing water, and to hear it and to see it. And it's very relaxing, you know, and seeing all the plants around and starting to connect with those elements, the plant world, the water world, and just really connecting with that. And that takes you back to an inner understanding of that's also part of you. You know, the plant world teaches us that. And they've been proven that forest bathing, you know, in Japan, is like so amazingly healing. So those are a few of the indicators. So it's always connecting to the plant world, the water world, and recognizing this is also part of my nature. This is part that I have. So if you think about a plant doesn't have to do anything. It's not like an animal that has to go and fight, or it doesn't have to scurry around using its instincts, instead it can just be, and it can just grow in a very gentle and organic way. And that's also part of you. And that gentle organic growth of the child has been sort of interrupted, and that's been the problem, with the whole setup with people with autoimmune. I mean, there's also an argument that says sort of since the 1980s there've been a lot more vaccines for small children, and again that's created 1 in 3 children now have atopic immune system reactions, whereas when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s, anyone who had any immune system reactions were, they were malingerants, it just wasn't a thing then, but now
heavy metals.
now everyone's allergic to everything. Now the official medical reason is because we clean more. Well, I'll tell you what, you haven't been around my house because I don't clean every day, so that's not the reason. It's not that we're cleaner people, it's because the vaccines, they're activating the immune system. And, I don't want to go into anti-vaxxing or pro-vaxxing, but what it does is the immune system should be dormant the whole time. And it's not, what it's doing is it's saying there's a problem, there's an illness out there somewhere that could get you. And so after the vaccine, you take the blood as blood sample, and there's lots more antibodies in the bloodstream. Now, to me, that is not a good sign, because it's stressful for the body to have more blood, antibodies in the bloodstream. But as far as the medical situation is concerned, it's a validation that you've now got immunity for that illness, So again, that whole setup is not trusting that your immune system, if it's in balance, will always look after you, And the thing that, if you do get an infectious disease, is because your organism, the body itself, isn't strong enough. So, through vitamin D and antioxidants. And if you ever know anyone who's got a very serious infection, something that's been proven to really work is high levels of vitamin C. And you can even do it intravenously if the person's very, very ill, and that can save people's lives. So vitamin C are antioxidants, and it's to help for the body to release toxins, because it's toxic, the toxic overload that's the real problem. So yes.
Is that would you say that's the same thing people could do, like people who have had a lot of vaccines, and what kind of clean system? Or
it's on a case-to-case basis, because some people are okay with vaccines and other people less so. But so what I'm talking about today is really a broad brushstroke, the fact that these are the possible reasons. Now, these are the factors that add to that whole imbalance with the immune system. So you've either got atopic, which means it's an overreaction of the immune system, or it's an autoimmune, which is actually thinking that the body is part of the problem. So they're 2 separate things. One is just like allergies, which is just overreacting to the outside, but the autoimmune is overreacting to your body, where your body becomes the problem. And the more, so again, with the autoimmune, the more you get stressed out by a situation, because what's really going on is your inner critic is saying it's your fault, what are you going to do about it? So it could be relationships, it could be work situations, that's what's really going on. And therefore the autoimmune has been, the immune system's been programmed to believe that the being part of you, the lump that's just sitting there doing nothing and just being, is not okay. It's not okay just to be, it creates this permanent sense of restlessness, that you've got to keep doing something about the situation, you know.
Right. Like for me, like that's that sense of like having to be the parent growing up, right? For my own parents and stuff and being in control.
Yeah.
It's like, it's that energy of like never being able to rest even as a child, because you need to be paying attention to situations.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think anyone who's listening to this has got autoimmune disease will possibly recognize those types of situations as children. And it may not be extreme, but there, you know, there will be some level of that, you know, where there is this anxiety that there is nobody there to kind of protect you or look after the situation, and that somehow you've got to figure it out. But really it's a hiding for nothing, because you don't really know how to figure it out, because you haven't got the information. You're not in a place of power, you know, to be able to change the situation, especially when you're a child. You know, can't change situations, can you? Because it's an adult world, isn't it? You know, so really kind of you know, recognizing that that's what's going on, but the setup is inside you, where the body is the inner child and the mind is the parent. So there's an internal, so we can't go back in time and change what happened to us in the past, but what we can do is change the setup within us right now, you know. So we use the methods that I described earlier, the water, the earth, and start to really ground ourselves. There's lots of methods that we can use to really ground and take away all that electrical charge that keeps being overactive within us, you know.
I'm always drawn to the water when stuff like that is like kind of coming up. A salt bath, you know, going, sitting by the lake and sitting in the water.
And there's an inner wisdom in us that already knows this. That's, you know, my inner wisdom was telling me today to look at the fountain. You know, and I wanted to do something else, but I felt very drawn to doing it. So my eyes and my beingness were drawing me into that situation, and I could feel it healing me on some very unconscious level, you know. So, you know, so again, we have got it inbuilt in us, this GPS, you know. We just have to trust it and not allow our minds to keep talking us out of those things, or to catastrophizing about what's going on for us, you know, or judging. You know, judgment, catastrophizing, those are the things that keep us in a state of fear, and the fear blocks our heart, which blocks our life force, which then can guide us into the right action and to heal us and create that coherence inside us, you know. So yes, yeah, brilliant.
Okay, we've given people a lot to think about, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of food for thought there. Yes, yeah, brilliant. Great. Well,
thanks so much for this. Thanks for having a conversation.
And yes, and until the next time.
Yes, of course.
Again.
Bye, everyone.
Right, take care. Bye-bye.